what that really boils down to is I'm somewhat of a control freak, as many entrepreneurs are and small business owners are. But there comes a point if you are in your own way and inhibiting your own growth by trying to hang on to too much.
Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. This is the Conscious Edge podcast, and I'm Alecia St, entrepreneur and coach. Along with my friend and wellness advocate, Jonathan Dugger, we're diving into what it means to embody radical self-acceptance while still evolving to lead with compassion and kindness. We're sharing our own experiences and expertise as we unpack imposter syndrome, perfectionism, procrastination, and all the other things that lead to burnout and keep you from experiencing pure joy, business growth, and maximum impact. This is a safe and supportive space to explore what it means to be a human creating wealth and building a business. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alecia St, and I have with me Jonathan Dugger. How are you?
There. I'm doing well. Doing well. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've recorded together.
It has.
And so today we want to dive into, that moment, or that we were talking before we started recording, that as you're going out and building your business, there's usually a point where you're doing everything yourself, and letting go of some of the control can feel really unsafe and scary. And so in this effort to do things the right way, you have to bring in other people, right way, right? You bring in other people into your business, because we talk a lot about, there's a book, Who Not How. It's not about everything that you know or how you do it. It's about who's going to be around you that helps you grow your business. And so you go out looking for the perfect person to fit that role or do that thing for you. And what looks good on paper and should work ends up being a disaster. And so I wanted to pick Jonathan's brain today, because it has been said to me how much you are loved and how much people enjoy hearing your voice every week. He's blushing and turning red.
My ears are burning.
You just say thank you.
Thank you.
But also people have expressed like they don't know a lot about you, because you share so much of your knowledge. But early on, I talked about how many things and different things that you've been involved in, and even beyond what you know academically and from an emotional regulation and emotional intelligence standpoint, and based on your expertise in your study, but also the life experiences and the wealth building that you've done and different types of investments that you've been involved in. You're a fascinating person. So.
Oh, goodness. Thank you. I'm just trying to let that land and be gracious and grateful, and instead of uncomfortable and giggly.
Okay. So I asked what lesson. I said, tell me some of the lessons that you've learned. And this one came up about how it is more important to find people who are aligned with how you do business than who looks good on paper. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
So you had some, before we get into it all, I wanted to first of all say, for those of you who've been listening for a long time now, we're so happy to have you every single week, and your comments and your messages mean so much to us. So thank you so much for taking the time to reach out to us, ask questions, let us know what lands for you. It's so helpful. And if you're brand new to the podcast, we want to say welcome. We do these every single week. And Jonathan and I are here to really explore more than just an individual strategy or here's how you make money, but really redefine success in a way that fills you up as an entire human. And that's what we do in our coaching practices. We have separate coaching practices. This is something that we do together because we love it.
Yes.
And it's fun and it makes us grow and it's uncomfortable and it's everything that we stand for in the world. So hit that follow button. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a review. It really helps us bring more people and take a moment and share this. Okay, so let's get into, I'm sure so many people can relate, starting out their business and feeling like they have to do everything themselves. And you said you didn't always rely on other people. What was that moment or what happened that made you realize that you really needed other people to bring into your business for things?
Well, as entrepreneurs, one of the elements I think that's true for a lot of entrepreneurs is that we're learn by doing type people. So I think there is an element of that is somewhat necessary, that we do a lot of things ourselves initially because it's how we learn and how we start feeling a level of confidence and competency so that we can grow, so that we can hopefully train somebody else or bring somebody else on to assist with various things. But I don't remember what year it was, but there came a tipping point where it just, lots of things started falling through the cracks with me trying to handle everything myself.
What were you doing?
Myself.
Just for context, what were you doing?
Well, I ran a very active corporate consulting practice where I did a lot of training development, coaching. And then I was doing real estate investing and mostly single family home flips and some holds as lease options. And most of the flips we did were pretty extensive, or that I did were pretty extensive rehabs. And I was even doing some of the rehab work myself.
Yeah, I know you were swinging hammers. You're kind of handy like that. So
a lot of tile work, a lot of things I shouldn't have been doing for sure. And definitely not the most effective, most efficient way to do things. But as I'm sure many of you can relate, you sometimes get into a mode where you convince yourself that you're the only one that can do it. Or you try outsourcing in some way one time and it doesn't go exactly to plan. And so you negate the concept completely. Yeah. See, I proved to myself this won't work. I just have to do this.
Right.
Well, what that really boils down to is I'm somewhat of a control freak, as many entrepreneurs are and small business owners are. But there comes a point if you are in your own way and inhibiting your own growth by trying to hang on to too much. Plus, it's damaging. I mean, I got to a point where I was sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night. I was showing up at client sites and forgetting all the notes that I had prepared or my PowerPoint presentation. It was affecting my professional life and my personal life in a big way. So there will come a point in time, if you're going to continue to grow, that you will need to bring on people. You'll need to outsource or hire employees or 1099s, whatever it is.
So I'm curious because what you're talking about specifically is really big assumptions. We talk all throughout this podcast about big assumptions, and a really common big assumption being, if I don't do it, it won't work out, or my business will fail, or if I don't do it, it won't be done right. There's all these if-then statements, which is the whole nature of a big assumption is, if this happens, or if this outcome, or I act this certain way, then I'm going to get a bad outcome.
Yes.
And then you go to try to hire someone or get help or bring in other experts for things that are outside of your wheelhouse. And you have these experiences and it's like, oh, see, I have to do everything myself. So you're just reinforcing that. So what was the progression for you of like, I guess maybe the pain of where you were became greater than the pain of having to change?
Well, and a lot of it initially involved self-work, because just like you're talking about, I had multiple situations where I would try and hire, let's say, a project manager or totally turn things over to a contractor. and it wouldn't work out. And I would use that as validation. It's like, see, this isn't a good idea. I just need to keep doing what I'm doing. And after like the second or third time, I really did start putting it into a framework. Okay, something is up here. I thought, this is a person that was referred to me. They should be great. This should have worked out. What's going on? And this is where you really take some self-reflection and some self-work, because what you have to recognize is that often we're creating the situation where it's going to fail. We're setting it up to fail because we have unrealistic expectations. We're not communicating properly. We have so many things in our head that we've done the same way for so long that we expect somebody else basically to read our mind and do it exactly the same way. Or we fault somebody else doing something differently, even though it's not worse or it's not causing damage, it's different, so it must be wrong. Mm-hmm. So those kind of assumptions that sabotage often get in the way.
I think the biggest thing that people have to get is, do not assume everyone thinks like you do, has the same values you do, like approaches problems the same way you do, or cares about the same things.
Yeah. Don't assume, and also don't judge based on your context, based on, this is my work ethic, and I'm trying to hold somebody to a standard that is mine that's not necessarily realistic for a different context or a different person. So, or whatever it is. So absolutely. That's a big thing right there, is assuming, making assumptions and making judgments that aren't realistic for a given situation or a given person or people.
So when you first started hiring people, and I think a lot of people do this, right? They look for the perfect person that's like, it's going to work out. So what were some of those places that you were looking for support?
I had in my head that if I got a referral from somebody that was doing similar things to me, then that person should be an automatic fit. They're validated, they're already vetted, then I shouldn't have to do any real work to train them up or coach them into my system or how I want to do things. And that's absolutely not accurate. The other thing too is this assumption that, and I used to tell my students this when I taught real estate investing, just because somebody should know doesn't mean they do know. And you can apply that all the way up the education chain to attorneys and accountants and bankers. So making an assumption that, I don't have to pay any attention to this anymore. I've completely given it over because this person, they should know much more than I do. Well, that's where some of that worthiness stuff can come in. It's like, oh, they've got different letters after their name, so they must be a much more in line with that knowledge than I am.
I literally just talked about this 2 weeks ago on the podcast with the whole bookkeeping situation, where it was like, oh yeah, they're very reputable. They know better, and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely knew more.
So one of those growth areas for me has definitely been being much more open to and aware of alignment with me and my partners and my businesses and a person because of who they are, and not so much about what they're supposed to know or what they're supposed to be bringing to the table from an experience standpoint, a degree standpoint, a referral standpoint. I'll kind of give you two extreme examples. And these are, Alecia and I talked about this before. I try and be very aware and careful with confidentiality because you never know who's listening to this, and maybe people that I've worked with or that kind of know who I'm talking about. But these two particular situations I think are an important example because it's definitely the extreme on the spectrum of people in alignment with a position and people and who they are, type of people they are. So the one example is we were looking to hire a full-time property manager at a property, and we decided to actually recruit for this person, like put up job postings and contact some job placement services that were specific to the area and specific to the industry. So it was going to cost us more money, but we had some folks that it had been a situation where we had some failed situations, I guess. So we were going to put some money into it, invest some extra effort into it. And we had a person that presented, it was probably our third or fourth interview that we did. And on paper, they were amazing. Strong property management background, strong recommendations, which we followed up on and talked to people. So they came well recommended. And it was almost immediately obvious that this person was not, in reality, were not what they look like on paper from a standpoint of work ethic, of communication and communication skills. But what started to become a concern very quickly is a lack of integrity and honesty. And long story short, this person ended up stealing a substantial amount of money from us and our company and disappeared off the face of the planet. We even tried to pursue legally and didn't get anywhere with that. So it was a huge lesson for me, very expensive lesson, that you need to trust your gut, because I had a gut on this person, and so did somebody else that works with us, that something was off and that they weren't necessarily the best fit for this particular role, or maybe any role. We had that. So there's that situation. The other end of the spectrum is a person that still works with us, and they are more family. They are an employee, but they're more family than employee. A little difficult to talk about because they're struggling with some health issues right now. But this person has worked with us now for almost 10 years, over 10 years. And I'm not exaggerating. When we first met this person, they were basically homeless. They were living in a park and had lived under mobile homes in a mobile home park, like found a place.
Literally under.
Yeah, literally under a home.
Yeah.
But this person was presented right away as not only eager and happy to do whatever we asked them to do, but super coachable, super willing to learn, and showed an initiative that was protective in fashion, like protective of us as individuals and of our businesses, but a type of loyalty that you can't put a price tag on.
Yeah.
And that was almost immediate. And outside looking in, there were people that probably knew some of this person's past and like, what are you guys doing? Why in the world would this be anything that you would consider? And this person has continually proven themselves to be not only a super hard worker, but able to think on their feet, able to adapt, able to figure out ways to save us money, but also just a really good person, compassionate and kind and helpful, always wanting to help our residents. And they work for us mostly in our manufactured housing community, in a couple of manufactured housing communities, but just a person that is incredibly well aligned with us as business people, us as people, that's just who we are, and with our businesses. And again, if we had not looked beyond the surface with this person and given them a shot, we would have never known that. So, and I'm not saying that works every time, because it doesn't. But, and some of you probably already know what I'm talking about, when you have a feeling that this person is just a fit. This is somebody that I want to work with and that wants to work with us, that'll work well within the context of how we do business, what our expectations are, what our priorities are. And when you have those instincts, I think it's important to follow through and be discerning, pay attention to how they do things and how they take feedback and input, but also be open to maybe a lack of knowledge. Ignorance doesn't equate to incompetence, is what I had an instructor that used to say that. So this person is very coachable and very willing to learn, eager to learn, loves taking on new skills, but also another important piece that has come up, and it is one for me too, very willing to admit when something is so far out of their comfort zone or wheelhouse that they don't think that they're the best fit. That's also important. Sometimes people are so eager to please that they'll take something on that's going to end up in disaster because it's not anything that they should have ever said they could do or willing to do in the first place. So those two extremes are two extremes of the spectrum, and there's lots of places in between, but both of those were huge learning lessons for me as a person, but as a business person specifically, to recognize that it's way more important to align the people with the project and with you as a person, as a business owner, than it is to pick the best on paper candidate.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something to be said, and I'm sure you have this as well. There's a lot of really good marketing out there, right? So someone could have the degree. You can hire copywriters to help you say the right thing. You can have designers that make your websites look beautiful.
Now you can have artificial intelligence write you a beautiful resume.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I forgot about that piece.
That's probably another podcast sometime.
But yeah, I just recorded an episode with Sarah G, my gal who does a lot of copywriting, and she just has this way of taking what I want to say and making it so that any kind of mind trash that I have floating around there, she's like, okay, well, we don't need to say that because that's planting a different seed. But she's just really eloquent in the way that she says things, and she says them the way that I would say them. And I find her very helpful. But we were talking about artificial intelligence as part of that podcast and how everyone's starting to look the same. Like they all sound good, but like you're void of personality. Super generic.
Yep.
Super generic. And so I wanted to ask you, so how do you go about finding that alignment? Because there's a lot of people who really struggle with trusting their gut.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things where you have to take some risks because you need the validation of it working out with the full knowledge that it might not. But also staying open and aware that, I build in some timelines. I'm going to give this person up to this X amount of time to kind of get up to speed or to own up to their own inadequacies or whatever it is, whatever gauge you're using, but also school yourself into giving them enough space and being willing to communicate in a way that's helpful and that's coaching as opposed to judgmental and derisive. Because, it's very easy for us to tear down. It's much more challenging. It takes more effort, more thought, more time and patience to build up. So, I mean, like this person that I was talking about earlier that has been such a blessing to our company, I can't imagine that segment of our business without them involved. And I can absolutely tell you that that particular segment of our business would not be nearly as successful if they hadn't been involved. So it's one of those things where I had to kiss a few toads to find that prince, but it's been worth it in so many ways. But so I think you've got to acknowledge that there's some risk involved and be willing to take those risks. And that could be said, that maybe that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself, because that could be said for business growth. There is risk involved. That whole risk reward context is important to understand and work on, because many of us start out very risk averse. So
I was going to say, you really have to know yourself.
Yeah.
To work with other people and start finding these people, you really do have to know yourself and know where you're going to get in your own way. Because I think people don't get that there's a certain level of discomfort you have to get comfortable with in having a business and making investments. And And having jobs is not secure either.
No.
It's such a
That's
fallacy.
A very false. Yeah, exactly. A very false security.
And yet we can go out and make money so many different ways. So again, that's a whole nother podcast. We're just about to go into a rabbit hole. But so I think it's knowing yourself, knowing how you work, knowing what's important to you. And I imagine there's a certain amount of being willing to connect with another human being. And I know that sounds really silly to say that, but so often our society right now, especially, is so disconnected, so putting on masks to protect themselves. And so in order to make that alignment, you really have to take the time to get to know people.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a fine line between being too familiar, especially early on, and making it about business. But this is my belief system, at least, is like, why would I hire somebody that I don't want to be around as a person? Or that doesn't want to be around me? I'll take some ownership of that too. I'm not the easiest person to be around sometimes. So, but it is also important to be able to still keep some professional distance, especially early on as you're building a relationship where you do make decisions based on the business. Like, is this person, I really like this person and I feel for them, but are they the best fit for my business? You do have to ask those hard questions sometimes. But then again, it's good to ask yourself, have I given them enough time? Have I built them up in the right way? Have I given them enough information? And sometimes you check all those boxes and it's still not a good fit. Then that's when you have to have those talks. But in my experience, at least, a few times that that's happened, if that person is who I thought they were, they recognize that I've done the best that I can, and so have they, and it's not a good fit. And then maybe we figure out something else. It's like, you know what? This capacity is not one that works, but what about this?
Right.
Or they suggest that. Or there's like, I had one person, this has not happened not that long ago, where they said, thank you so much. I have hung on longer than I should have, because I didn't want to let you down. But I actually have this awesome opportunity somewhere else. And now you've basically given me permission to go do that. So just being honest with yourself, honest with that person, and keeping open to where the gaps are. And if those gaps are overcomable, is that a word?
Overcomable, I don't know.
That you're something you can overcome.
Yeah. And I agree with you on that fine line. It's like, you can like someone, but they are not capable of fulfilling the role that you need. And that's not necessarily what I was meaning there, but it's willing to have those hard conversations. Yeah. And so that when I say there's a certain amount of vulnerability, there's like, you could get hurt, right? And again, I'm going to use air quotes, hurt, right? It could be uncomfortable for you, something that's going to bump up against one of those big assumptions that if I have to tell someone the truth, or if I have to be the boss, then I won't be liked. And as much as people hate to admit it, a lot of our fears stem back to a fear of being judged, not liked, ousted, criticized, rejected. And really that comes back to what other people think of us. So that other piece is getting really okay with having to have those honest, hard conversations with people when it doesn't work out also is really important.
Yes, for sure.
So knowing that alignment piece is so big is,
Another thing that occurred to me was we were talking through about the importance of people. I mean, it has become so paramount in our businesses, and I use plural a lot because I do have other partners, and my primary partner, whose name is also John, he and I had this conversation a few years ago. When he and I both started working together, both of us were at sort of a reinventing place in our businesses. Both had had some very traumatic and dramatic things happen business-wise and personally too, along the same kind of timelines. And then we came together from this place of sort of reinventing ourselves as business people and reinventing ourselves as partners. business partners, and we really were focused on the profit in a particular transaction or the profit in a particular asset class or whatever it was. So it was about the money, because I'll just be blatant about it. We were coming from a place of scarcity. And so we stayed focused on that because that's how we started. So it was just sort of like that was the pattern we created. And then at some point, probably 2 or 3 years in, we were burning ourselves out. We weren't happy with what we were doing and kind of went through some blame and trying to figure that out. And then finally came to a place of, okay, let's reassess priorities. What is most important to us? And so we had this conversation. I remember it distinctly. We decided to splurge a little bit. We took a trip to Park City and skied for a day, and then had a planning session, which we became an annual thing that we do at the beginning of every year. And we were like, okay, we've got to, what's the Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing the same way and expecting different results. Well, that's what we were doing. So, we were butting up against insanity. And the thing that came out of this 2 days of really diving deep conversations is that it's about people first. So our priority shifted from profit first to people, and then a realignment of people with projects, because we wanted to do things that were fulfilling, that were enjoyable, that were educating. And what we figured out is if we aligned those two things, the profit would come. So the money piece, the business needs to make money to stay solvent and stay flourishing and growing. So that's an important part, but it is not the most important part, at least for how we do business. And it changed everything. It changed everything. And not to sound arrogant or to brag, but our profits went up a lot. Mm-hmm. The changing the priority, changing our energy and how we directed our energy, and finding the right connection with the right people and the right people with the right project increased our profits. So there you go.
I'm just taking that all in, and I'm thinking how relevant that you are talking about that. And there's a lot of, imagine if people really were the center of business again.
Imagine.
And I think it's the small business owners that are the ones that need to drive that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think there's some shifts. I think there's massive shifts that will come. And I want to be on the side of people.
Amen. Amen. No, totally agree. That's a rabbit hole that could go way down.
I know. That's why I was like, I need to keep this a little bit high level. But I was just thinking, oh man, in fact, and I think we'll probably wrap it up here. I was in the car dropping off the kids today at drop off at school. And it's interesting. I had 2 separate realizations or things that kind of came up is we get into 4 lines. And you're supposed to take turns. 1 car goes from each line, and then you keep going. And every now and then you'll have someone who sneaks in and cuts in line. And it's interesting the way people drive and the way people park their cars and where they choose to park and how they go through the school drop-off line is I just happen to notice that there are some, how they drive and do drop off is how they do life. Let's just put it that way.
It's a whole personality assessment right there.
There's a personality assessment right there. So that's one thing. But the other thing was my kids got out of the car and then you kind of keep driving. And there's a little girl getting out of her car. Her parents have parked and they're dropping her off and she is in a wheelchair. So they have to make some accommodations for her. And so I saw her standing there and all these cars are going and I saw her standing there. So I just stopped traffic to let her go at the same time that a teacher was kind of like, hey, could we stop and let this poor kid that's sitting out in the cold while you're all warm in your cars? And what came to me was, gosh, if everyone just looked up. Just look up, look around, look up, and look for people where you could put yourself in someone else's shoes and just do the kind thing. I think that's how you get that humanity to come back, is you have to look up and look around. And so when you're talking about your business being about people, you're looking up and you're looking around and you're saying, where will people thrive? Where can I do a service to them? And sometimes the service is to let them go because they're not a good fit. But where can I serve people? And how can I do meaningful projects that make a difference in the world? And the prosperity comes into alignment.
Yep, absolutely.
So I guess with all of that being said, I'd say look up and look around today.
Through compassionate eyes.
Yeah. Just that moment of helping someone else, and it takes 2 seconds, and being considerate. And so I'm sending you so much love.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.